in this second part, I will just see the sediment, vegetation, clouds and cities on the Earth-like planet. So the sediment is the first layer that we will add, and it's basically to define the different terrain type I will have on my planet. So the colors are quite important to look at here. I have the sediment color I got everywhere but in the desert. Then I got the sediment in the desert, and I can choose the color of the sediment either using the moisture or using the altitude. So here it's moisture selected, or I can do the 8 selected. I can change, of course, the range over here. So you see the green here is matching the highest part of the terrain, and the white is the lowest part of the terrain. Or you can use the moisture, and with the moisture you can see that the green is the less moist part of the planet, and the white here is the part where you have the most moisture. So you can of course tune that, so you can try also the other way around here to have some green lands near the coastline, and everything else will be kind of burnt. With the color bias you can change the way it's spread. Like this, it's probably more interesting. And I will change that also for the desert. So here it will the part where it's more you have the biggest moisture level. So I will definitely put something greener. And here it's where you have something very dry and well, far away from the coastline, and it's very hot. So probably something more yellowish. Maybe I will try to have something less saturated. Okay. Okay, so I have something that is pretty cool now. The sediments are okay, and the sediment in the out of the desert is interesting too. Maybe I will try to change a bit the spreading. Okay, like this. Okay. And now I can play with the vegetation. That will add more variation. Well, before that, maybe I've not talked a lot about the way you can change the spreading of the sediment. So with the erosion blend, you can define where you want to have your sediment or not. So if you increase the erosion blend, you will basically keep more mountains more present in the earth here. You can define also if you want to have sediments in cavities or basically everywhere, and you can also change the sediment on slope. So if you want to have sediments on slope or not, it's quite visible over here. You can basically define that here. And you can change also the sediment level by 8. So if you want to avoid having sediment on the highest mountain, you can just change the range over here. If you want to have sediments everywhere under, let's say, this level, then change here. And then you can play with the erosion amplification just to tune the spreading of the sediment. And you can also change the sharpness. You see, maybe it's better to see that closer. When it's very sharp, you basically have sediment, or don't have sediment. You don't have in between values. With a lower value of sharpness, you have something smoother. Okay. You can also say here if you want to have sediment on secondary noise or not. The secondary noise is the cracks here, and so I can say I don't want to have any sediment, so it's really rocks around here. Or you can say, okay, I allow sediment to be there. And you can also change the roughness on the sediment part. So if I reduce the roughness, it will be more shiny. You see that over here. It's really up to you. I will keep everything quite rough for the moment. Okay. So now let's go for the vegetation. The vegetation will just add smaller patches, so you can really define the scale you want to have. And of course the colors. You can define also if you want to grow vegetation everywhere in the sediment, or everywhere in the sediment and where you don't have any sediment. So grow outside sediments, if I increase that, you will have the vegetation everywhere. Here I just have vegetation where I have sediment. I have sediments nearly everywhere in this planet, so it's the difference is quite subtle, but well, you see it. The blending is the intensity of the vegetation, and you can amplify to have more vegetation everywhere. It's basically spreading the mask of vegetation. It's more interesting here to increase a bit to amplify a bit and keep it in between to have interesting stuff like here. So I will just quickly do HD render to see. Okay, now we have something interesting. Yep. And beside that, I have also the vegetation in desert, and also I can change the growth vegetation by slope or by 8. You see that I have some vegetation over here. I should be able to reduce it by, okay, here it's better. If I don't want to have vegetation on top of my highest mountain. Okay, and you can change also the sharpness, so the transition between the vegetation and non-vegetation part. For the color of the vegetation, you can either choose the default value with moisture to 0, which means that the color will be defined by the 8, or you can change that with the moisture select. So it will use the moisture level to define which color the vegetation is. I will keep it with the default 8 selection, and maybe tune a bit the color bias. Oh, it was already quite good, I think. And you can also modify the roughness depending on the vegetation presence or not. Okay, so I think we have something decent here. Maybe it's a bit too regular, so I can maybe change the noise type and go for something more like multifractal here, and change the ramp and change the scale also. Increase the roughness. Okay, so I will reduce the scale. Increase a bit the roughness. So that reduce the small patches I got everywhere. Now I got bigger patches, so can change, see the difference. Okay, maybe I will reduce a bit the amplification. Okay, like this it's better. Okay, now I got my sediment vegetation. I will go for the cities. So the cities will be spread anywhere on the planet. What I can do is maybe increase the possibility of having cities around the coastline, which is something that is pretty common on Earth. So you have just have to find it. Well, coastal cities here. So if I increase coastal cities, you increase the possibility of having cities near the coast, and if you reduce that, you will have less possibility of having cities on the coast. So I will increase it here. So you see all of these cities are more present now, and I will also add the secondary road, which adds some more interesting stuff in details in the cities. Otherwise, it's just a big zone with everything lit. The secondary road just add more details, you see. And you can change the road scale and the secondary road scale. Okay. Just check in HD. So you see that even if you're not on the dark side, you see the gray part here. It's basically the daylight color here, and you can define the blending with the terrain, the limit of the terrain. So if you want to see more clearly the roads or less, the sharpness, and the color bias. And same for the night light, and otherwise you have all the parameters here. So the first thing here is the noise. So it's all the cities are generated, so you can change the seed to have different patches of light. You can change the scale of the light and the light limits. So if you decrease the light limits, you will have basically everything that will be lit full power. If you increase it, it will be nearly everything shut down. And you have the light sharpness here. So I will keep that like that. It's okay. Cities coverage is basically how large your cities will be. Values like that are interesting because you have a lot of smaller places where you have interesting stuff happening. And the road coverage is basically how intense the roads will be, how large the roads will be, and if the cities are spreading a lot around the roads. You can define also minimal and maximal altitude. So for instance, I'd just like to avoid having stuff in the mountains directly here. So I will change the maximal altitude here. And you see it's just erasing the road here. And I can change the smoothness to have something soft or hard. You can change also the minimal and maximal temperature. So if you say that the desert is really hot in your planet, then you can reduce the possibility of having cities where it's too hot. So the maximal temperature, you can reduce it, and you see you have less cities where it's very hot. Same for the minimal temperature. You can increase the minimal temperature to avoid having cities where it's really cold. I will change a bit the road scale because it's too long here. Here it's better. You have more dense level of roads. Then you have the terrain modifier. It's basically if you don't use the terrain modifier, the roads will be absolutely straight, and if you increase the terrain modifier, it will take into account the height of the terrain to just have more variation on the straightness of the roads. Same here for the slope influence. It's not really visible on this one, but it's basically the fact that you will have or not roads on a very rough terrain. And the ambient occlusion here, it's basically to add more modulation depending on the terrain you have. So here it's adding some interesting variation, so I will keep it. Okay. And then you can tune the lighting itself, so you have the direct light bias here in the color, the direct intensity, and the indirect intensity. It's basically the spreading of the roads. I think the direct is too is quite sensitive value. Okay, I will keep it like that and do a render to see all the details. Okay, maybe I've removed too much the cities with the minimal temperature, I think. Oh, it's okay, it's okay. Looked quite decent. Okay, and once you have that, you can now go to the clouds layer. For the clouds layer, it's really up to you if you want to have very small ones like the default value, or having more large one with lots of details, using the hyperfractal, for instance, here. I will increase the roughness, reduce a bit the covering, make it smoother. And the Coriolis intensity is how stretched the clouds are on the equator. So here you see that the shape you have here is coming from the Coriolis intensity and spread. And with this slider you can play on the level of details you will have on the shape of your cloud. It really depends on the smoothness. When it's very smooth you barely see it. When it's very sharp you see it better. Maybe it's a bit too rough here. It's better here. I will do also a render of the clouds to see. Okay, it's really soft here. I can add also some twirls. Okay, and maybe change the scale over here to have a larger one. It's more interesting. It's just to break the shape of the cloud here, and you can change the density to have more or less twirls. Okay, so and once you're happy with your clouds, you can also change the color, change the intensity of the ambient occlusion, basically darkening a bit the clouds. And here you see all the details in the cloud because I've reduced the softness of the ambient occlusion and increased the scale. Maybe something in between is better, like this. Okay, and then for a better result, you can go into the shader now and add the atmosphere and change the atmosphere value. So the first three values define basically the color of the atmosphere, and it's by default tuned for a Earth-like planet. So it's basically reddish red orange for sunset, sundown, and otherwise it's kind of bluish on top of the planet. And then you can change the height of the atmosphere, so it's the thickness of the atmosphere. Then you have the fog, which is on the planet itself, and the density. The denser, the less you will see the ground, of course. So just choose carefully your values to have something decent. Here it's clearly too dense, too sharp. Okay, like this it's better. And you can also tune the Mie scattering and Rayleigh scattering. So the Mie scattering is visible here. It's basically the scattering of the sun when you're seeing through the atmosphere. And the Rayleigh atmosphere scattering, sorry, is the spreading of the light in the atmosphere in any direction. Okay, and we'll do a new render. Maybe reduce a bit the density. Okay. And we're done. We've done our first full planet here in the tutorial. I hope this has helped you to understand a bit more how to use different parameters in Grand Designer. Don't hesitate if you have questions to put them under the video or on the forums. Thank you for listening to this quite long tutorial, and if you want more of this, just ask. See you. Bye bye.